The nature of personal reality. Specific practical techniques for solving everyday problems and enriching the life you know. By Jane Roberts and Seth. Introduction by Jane Roberts. I'm proud to publish this book under my own name, though I don't fully understand the mechanics of its production or the nature of the personality I assume in delivering it. I had no conscious work to do on the book at all. I simply went into trance twice a week, spoke in a quote-unquote mediumistic capacity for Seth, or as Seth, and dictated the words to my husband, Robert Butts, who wrote them down. I consider the book quote-unquote mine, in that I don't believe it could have been written without me and my particular abilities. On the other hand, I realized that far more is involved. I had to read the manuscript to find out what was in it, for example, and to that extent, the book doesn't seem mine. But what does that mean? My idea briefly is this. Our usual orientation is focused pretty exclusively in what we think of as the quote-unquote real world, but there are many realities. By shifting our consciousness, we can glimpse these alternate realities, and all of them are the appearance that reality takes under certain conditions. I don't believe that we can necessarily describe one in terms of another. For years, I've been confused, trying to define Seth in the usual true and false world of facts. There, he's accepted as an independent spirit, a spirit guide by those with spiritualistic beliefs, or as some displaced portion of my own personality by the scientific community. I couldn't accept either idea, at least not in undiluted form. If I said, look, people, I don't think Seth is a spirit in the way you mean, then this was interpreted as an acknowledgement that Seth was only a portion of my personality. Some people thought that I was trying to put Seth down or deny them the aid of a super being when at last they thought they'd found one. Actually, I think that the selves we know in normal life are only the three-dimensional actualizations of other source selves from which we receive our energy and life. Their reality can't be contained in the framework of our creaturehood, though it is being constantly translated through our present individuality. The quote-unquote spirit guide designation may be a handy symbolic representation of this idea, and I'm not saying that spirit guides do not exist. I am saying that the idea deserves greater examination, for the spirit guide may represent something far different than we think. The idea can also be limiting if it always places revelatory knowledge outside of us and tries to make literal some extraordinary phenomena that may be beyond such interpretation. While I was trying to define Seth that way and questioning whether or not he was a spirit guide, I was closed off to some extent from his greater reality, which exists in terms of vast imaginative and creative power that is bigger than the world of facts and can't be contained in it. Seth's personality is quite observable in our sessions, for example, but the source of that personality isn't. For that matter, the origin of any personality is mysterious and not apparent in the objective world. My job is to enlarge the dimensions of that world and people's concepts of it. Seth's books may be the product of another dimensional aspect of my own consciousness, not focused in this reality, plus something else that is untranslatable in our terms, with Seth a great psychic creation, more real than any quote-unquote fact. His existence may simply lie in a different order of events than the one we're used to. I'm not saying that we shouldn't apply what we learn to the ordinary world. Certainly, I'm trying to do that, and Seth wrote this book to help people deal more effectively with their daily lives. I am insisting that we must be very careful about making literal interpretations, lest we limit a multidimensional phenomenon by tying it down to a three-dimensional fact system. Intuitively and emotionally, we often understand more than we intellectually realize. Trying to define revelatory knowledge, or a Seth, in terms of our limited ideas about human personality is like trying to translate, say, a rose to the number 3, or trying to explain one in terms of the other. The funny thing is that a personality not focused in our reality can help people live in that world more effectively and joyfully by showing them that other realities also exist. In this book, Seth is saying that you can change your experience by altering your beliefs about yourself and physical existence. To me, the Seth material is no longer a continuing manuscript of fascinating theories to be carefully judged against reality. In a strange way, it has come alive. The concepts within it live. I experience them, and because of this, my personal reality has expanded. I've begun to glimpse the greater inner dimensions from which our usual lives emerge, and to familiarize myself with other alternate methods of perception that can be used not only to see other quote-unquote worlds, but to help us deal more effectively with this one. While Seth was producing this book, my own life was immeasurably enriched in unforeseen ways. Frequent psychedelic-type experiences paralleled Seth's dictated material, and my own creative and psychic abilities developed into some entirely new areas. Just before Seth began The Nature of Personal Reality, a Seth book, for instance, I found myself embarked on a new venture I called the Sumari development. Sumari refers to a quote-unquote family of consciousnesses who share certain overall characteristics. There is a language involved that isn't a language in usual terms. I think that it operates as a psychological and psychic framework that frees me from normal verbal reference, letting me express and communicate inner feelings and data that lie just beneath formalized word patterns. The Sumari development constantly expanded as Seth produced this book. Now, various altered states of consciousness are involved. In one, I write Sumari poetry, and in another, I translate what I've written. At a different level, I sing Sumari songs, showing musical knowledge and accomplishment far beyond my normal talents or background. The songs can also be translated, but they communicate emotionally whether or not the words are understood. In yet another state of consciousness, material is received that is supposed to represent remnants of ancient speaker manuscripts. These are also translated later. Seth defines the speakers as teachers, both physical and non-physical, who constantly interpret and communicate inner knowledge through the ages. My husband has also written Sumari, but I have to translate it for him. As Seth continued dictating the nature of personal reality, I wrote a complete poetry manuscript, Dialogues of the Soul and Mortal Self in Time, in which I worked out many of my own beliefs as per suggestions Seth was giving in this book. This led to another group of poems, The Speakers. To me, this all means that there is a rich vein of creativity and knowledge available to each according to his abilities, just beneath the surface of usual consciousness. I believe that it is a part of our human heritage, accessible to some extent to any person who explores the inner dimensions of the mind. Dialogues of the Soul and Mortal Self in Time, The Speakers, and some Sumari poetry are being combined into a book that will be published soon by Prentice Hall. I consider it a companion book to this one. It shows what was happening in my personal reality while Seth was writing his book on the subject, and reveals how the creative impetus splashes out into all areas of the personality. Seth often refers to the poems and to the experiences that initiated them. Many of those events occurred as I tried to understand the relationship between his world and mine, and the connection between inner and outer experience. But beside this, as Seth was dictating this present book, I also found myself writing a novel, The Education of Oversoul 7, which was produced more or less automatically. Oversoul 7, the main character, achieved his own kind of reality. I'd say mentally, okay, 7, let's have the next chapter. And there it was as quickly as I could write it down. Portions of the book also came in the dream state. I know that 7 and his teacher, Cypress, exist in certain terms, yet their reality can't be explained either in the usual fact world. For example, the novel included many Sumari poems and portions of speaker manuscripts, and when I sing Sumari, I identify with Cypress, who is supposed to be a fictional character. I could also tune into 7 for help with personal challenges I discovered. I love to go full blast ahead, using my abilities as freely as possible. Yet quite as strongly, I'm often scandalized intellectually by some of the events that intuitively intrigue me, or by the interpretations placed upon them. It does no good to pretend otherwise, and I think there's a good reason for this sometimes uneasy blend of intuition and intellect. I'm learning that both elements are important in my work and in Seth's, and perhaps my own refusal to accept pat answers leads me to search so intensely, and is responsible to some degree for my quote-unquote bringing in a Seth instead of a Mad Hatter. The Sumari development, along with the experiences connected with the education of Oversoul 7 and the nature of personal reality, brought up so many questions that I was forced to seek a larger framework in which to understand what was happening. As a result, I'm working on a book called Aspect Psychology, which I hope will present a theory of personality large enough to contain man's psychic nature and activities. Seth refers to aspects, as we call it, in this present book, and it should be published sometime in 1975. In the meantime, all I can say is this. We live in a world of physical facts, but these spring from a deeper realm of creativity, and in a real sense, facts are fictions that spring alive in our experience. All facts. Seth, then, is as much a fact as I am or you are, and in a strange way, he straddles both worlds. I hope that aspects will also span the world of facts and the rich inner realities from which they come, for our experience includes each. The nature of personal reality not only enriched my creative life, but challenged my ideas and beliefs. I agree wholeheartedly with the concepts Seth presents here, while realizing that they run counter to many accepted religious, social, and scientific dogmas. Certainly, this book is an answer to all those who have written for help in applying Seth's ideas to ordinary living, and I am certain that it will assist many people in dealing with the varied events and problems of daily life. Seth's main idea is that we create our personal reality through our conscious beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world. Following this is the concept that the quote-unquote point of power is in the present, not in the past of this life or any other. He stresses the individual's capacity for conscious action and provides excellent exercises designed to show each person how to apply these theories to any life situation. The message is plain. We are not at the mercy of the subconscious or helpless before forces that we cannot understand. The conscious mind directs unconscious activity and has at its command all of the powers of the inner self. These are activated according to our ideas about reality. We are gods couched in creaturehood, Seth says, given the ability to form our experience as our thoughts and feelings become actualized. Seth first mentioned the nature of personal reality in session 608, April 5th, 1972, only shortly after Rob and I had finished reading proofs for his previous book, Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul. He actually began dictation on April 10th, 1972, but our personal reality was suddenly disturbed when we were caught in the flood caused by Tropical Storm Agnes. As a result, as you'll see in Rob's notes, further work on the book was delayed for some time. Seth often uses episodes from our lives as specific examples of larger issues, and our experiences with the flood served as a starting point for his discussions of personal beliefs and disasters. In several other instances, he also used our life situation as his source material, an intriguing turnabout. Since the early days of our sessions, which began in late 1963, Seth has consistently called me Rupert and Rob Joseph, saying that these names refer to the greater selves from which our present identities spring. He continues that practice in this book. As usual, Rob methodically records each session in his own version of shorthand and then types it. This is much easier and faster than taping each session, replaying it, and then typing. Periodically, Rob notes the passage of time to show how long it takes Seth to get through a particular passage. Seth himself dictates the words to be underlined or put in quotes or parentheses. Often he indicates the placement of colons and other punctuations as well. This book should help each reader understand the nature of private experience and use that knowledge to make daily living more creative and enjoyable. Jane Roberts, Elmira, New York, November 6th, 1973. Preface by Seth. The Manufacture of Personal Reality. Experience is the product of the mind, the spirit, conscious thoughts and feelings, and unconscious thoughts and feelings. These together form the reality that you know. You are hardly at the mercy of a reality, therefore, that exists apart from you or is thrust upon you. You are so intimately connected with the physical events composing your life experience that often you cannot distinguish between the seemingly material occurrences and the thoughts, expectations, and desires that gave birth to them. If there are strongly negative characteristics present in your most intimate thoughts, if these actually form bars between you and a more full life, still you often look through the bars, not seeing them. Until they are recognized, they are impediments. Even obstacles have a reason for being. If they are your own, then it is up to you to recognize them and discover the circumstances behind their existence. Your conscious thoughts can be great clues in uncovering such obstructions. You are not nearly as familiar with your own thoughts as you may imagine. They can escape from you like water through your fingers, carrying with them vital nutrients that spread across the landscape of your psyche, and all too often carrying sludge and mud that clog up the channels of experience and creativity. An examination of your conscious thoughts will tell you much about the state of your inner mind, your intentions and expectations, and will often lead you to a direct confrontation with challenges and problems. Your thoughts, studied, will let you see where you are going. They point clearly to the nature of physical events. What exists physically exists first in thought and feeling. There is no other rule. You have the conscious mind for a good reason. You are not at the mercy of unconscious drives unless you consciously acquiesce to them. Your present feelings and expectations can always be used to check your progress. If you do not like your experience, then you must change the nature of your conscious thoughts and expectations. You must alter the kinds of messages that you are sending through your thoughts to your own body, to friends and associates. Each thought has a result in your terms. The same kind of thought, habitually repeated, will seem to have a more or less permanent effect. If you like the effect, then you seldom examine the thought. If you find yourself assailed by physical difficulties, however, you begin to wonder what is wrong. Sometimes you blame others, your own background, or a previous life, if you accept reincarnation. You may hold God or the devil responsible, or you may simply say, that is life, and accept the negative experience as a necessary portion of your lot. You may finally come to a half understanding of the nature of reality and wail, I believe that I have caused these ill effects, but I find myself unable to reverse them. If this is the case, then regardless of what you have told yourself thus far, you still do not believe that you are the creator of your own experience. As soon as you recognize this fact, you can begin at once to alter those conditions that cause you dismay or dissatisfaction. No one forces you to think in any particular manner. In the past, you may have learned to consider things pessimistically. You may believe that pessimism is more realistic than optimism. You may even suppose, and many do, that sorrow is ennobling, a sign of deep spiritualism, a mark of apartness, a necessary mental garb of saints and poets. Nothing could be further from the truth. All consciousness has within it the deep abiding impetus to use its abilities fully, to expand its capacities, to venture joyfully beyond the seeming barriers of its own experience. The very consciousnesses within the smallest molecules cry out against any ideas of limitation. They yearn toward new forms and experiences. Even atoms, then, constantly seek to join in new organizations of structure and meaning. They do this, quote unquote, instinctively. Man has been endowed and has endowed himself with a conscious mind to direct the nature, shape, and form of his creations. All deep aspirations and unconscious motivations, all unspoken drives, rise up for the approval or disapproval of the conscious mind and await its direction. Only when it abdicates its functions does it allow itself to become swayed by quote-unquote negative experience. Only when it refuses responsibility does it finally find itself at the seeming mercy of events over which it appears to have no control. Now, books on positive thinking alone, while sometimes beneficial, usually do not take into consideration the habitual nature of negative feelings, aggressions, or repressions. Often these are merely swept under the rug. The authors instead tell you to be positive, compassionate, strong, optimistic, filled with joy and enthusiasm, without telling you what to do to get out of the predicament you may be in, and without understanding the vicious circle that may seem to entrap you. Such books, again, while sometimes of value, do not explain how thoughts and emotions cause reality. They do not take into consideration the multidimensional aspects of the self or the fact that ultimately each personality, while following definite general laws, must still find and follow his or her own way of adapting these to personal circumstances. If you are in poor health, you can remedy it. If your personal relationships are unsatisfactory, you can change them for the better. If you are in poverty, you can instead find yourself surrounded by abundance. Whether or not you realize it, you have pursued your present course with determination, using many resources for ends or reasons that at one time made sense to you. You may say, poor health makes no sense to me, or a fractured relationship with my mate is hardly what I was after, or I certainly have not been pursuing poverty after all my hard work. If you were born poor or born sick, then it certainly seems to you that these circumstances were thrust upon you, yet they were not, and to some extent or another, they can be changed for the better. This does not mean that effort is not required and determination. It does mean that you are not powerless to change events and that each of you, regardless of your position, status, circumstances, or physical condition, is in control of your own personal experience. You see and feel what you expect to see and feel. The world, as you know, is a picture of your expectations. The world, as the race of man knows it, is the materialization in mass of your individual expectations. As children come from your physical tissues, So is the world your joint creation. I am writing this book to help each individual solve his or her own personal problems. I hope to do this by showing you exactly the way in which you form your own reality, by explaining the ways in which you can alter it to your advantage. The existence of so-called negative thoughts and feelings will not be glossed over, but neither will your ability to handle these, for they are quite under your control. There are methods of using these as springboards for creativity. At no time will you be told to repress them, to ignore them. You will be shown how to recognize those within your experience, to discover which of them has been allowed to run away with you, and how to manage those that seem to be beyond your control. The methods that I will outline demand concentration and effort. They will also challenge you and bring into your life expansion and alterations of consciousness of a most rewarding nature. I am not a physical personality. Basically, however, neither are you. Your experience now is physical. You are a creator, translating your expectations into physical form. The world is meant to serve as a reference point. The exterior appearance is a replica of inner desire. You can change your personal world. You do change it without knowing it. You have only to use your ability consciously, to examine the nature of your thoughts and feelings, and project those with which you basically agree. They coalesce into the events with which you are so intimately familiar. I hope to teach you methods that will allow you to understand the nature of your own reality, and to point a way that will let you change that reality in whatever way you choose. Part 1. Where You and the World Meet. Chapter 1. The Living Picture of the World. The living picture of the world grows within the mind. The world as it appears to you is like a three-dimensional painting in which each individual takes a hand. Each color, each line that appears within it, has first been painted within a mind, and only then does it materialize without. In this case, however, the artists themselves are a portion of the painting and appear within it. There is no effect in the exterior world that does not spring from an inner source. There is no motion that does not first occur within the mind. The great creativity of consciousness is your heritage. It does not belong to mankind alone, however. Each living being possesses it, and the living world consists of the spontaneous cooperation that exists between the smallest and the highest, the greatest and the lowly, between the atoms and the molecules and the conscious reasoning mind. All manner of insects, birds, and beasts cooperate in this venture, producing the natural environment. This is as normal and inevitable as the fact that your breath causes a mist to form on glass if you breathe upon it. All consciousness creates the world, rising out of feeling tone. It is a natural product of what your consciousness is. Feelings and emotions emerge into reality in certain specific ways. Thoughts appear, growing on the bed already laid. The seasons spring up, formed by ancient feeling tones having deep and abiding rhythms. They are the result, again, of innate creative aspects that are a portion of all life. These ancient aspects lie now deeply buried in the psyches of all species, and from them the individual patterns, specific blueprints for new differentiations, emerge. The body of the earth can be said to have its own soul or mind, whichever term you prefer. Using this analogy, the mountains and oceans, the valleys and rivers, and all natural phenomena spring from the earth's soul, as all events and all manufactured objects appear from the inner mind or soul of mankind. The inner world of each man and woman is connected with the inner world of the earth. The spirit becomes flesh. Part of each individual's soul, then, is intimately connected with what we will call the world soul, or the soul of the earth. The smallest blade of grass or flower is aware of this connection, and without reasoning comprehends its position, its uniqueness, and its source of vitality. The atoms and molecules that compose all objects, whether it be the body of a person, a table, a stone, or a frog, know the great passive thrust of creativity that lies beneath their own existence, and upon which their individuality floats, distinct, clear, and unassailable. So does the human individual rise up in victorious distinctiveness from the ancient and yet ever-new fountains of its own soul. The self rises from unknowing into knowing, constantly surprising itself. As you read these sentences, for example, some of your knowledge is conscious knowing and is instantly available. Some is unconscious, but even the unconscious knowledge is knowing in its own unknowing. You always know what you are doing, even when you do not realize it. Your eye knows it sees, though it cannot see itself except through the use of reflection. In the same way, the world as you see it is a reflection of what you are, a reflection not in glass, but in three-dimensional reality. You project your thoughts, feelings, and expectations outward, then you perceive them as the outside reality. When it seems to you that others are observing you, you are observing yourself from the standpoint of your own projections. Now, you are the living picture of yourself. You project what you think you are outward into flesh. Your feelings, your conscious and unconscious thoughts, all alter and form your physical image. This is fairly easy for you to understand. It is not as easy, however, to realize that your feelings and thoughts form your exterior experience in the same way, or that the events that appear to happen to you are initiated by you within your mental or psychic inner environment. Your body does not just happen to be thin or fat, tall or short, healthy or ill. These characteristics are mental and are thrust outward by you upon your image. I do not mean to be facetious, but you were not born yesterday. Your soul was not born yesterday in those terms, but before the annals of time as you think of time. The characteristics that were yours at birth were yours for a reason. The inner self chose them. To a large extent, the inner self can even now alter many of them. You did not arrive at birth without a history. Your individuality was always latent within your soul, and the quote-unquote history that is a part of you is written within unconscious memory that resides not only within your psyche, but is faithfully decoded in your genes and chromosomes and fulfilled in the blood that rushes through your veins. You are aware, alert, and participating in many more realities than you know as your soul expresses itself through you. That consciousness of your usual daylight hours, the ego consciousness, rises up like a flower from the ground of the quote-unquote underneath, the unconscious bed of your own reality. Though you are not aware of it, this ego itself emerges, then falls back again into the unconscious, from which another ego then rises as a new bloom from the springtime earth. You do not have the same ego now that you had 5 years ago, but you are not aware of the change. Ego rises out of what you are, in other words. It is a part of the action of your being and consciousness. But as the eye cannot see its own shifting colors and expressions, as it is not aware that it lives and dies constantly as its atomic structure changes, so you are not aware that the ego continually changes, dies, and is reborn. Physically, the structure of a cell retains its identity, even while the matter that composes it is continually altered. The cell rebuilds itself in line with its own pattern of identity, yet is always a part of emerging action, alive and responding even in the midst of its own multitudinous deaths. So psychological structures form to which various names are given. The names are meaningless, but the structures behind them are not. Such psychological structures also retain their identity, their pattern of uniqueness, even while they change constantly, die, and are reborn. The I rises out of the physical structure. The ego rises out of the structure of the psyche. It cannot see itself, as the I cannot. Both look outward, in one case away from the physical body, and in the other case away from the inner psyche to the environment. The creative body consciousness creates the I. The creative inner psyche creates the ego. The body forms the I in the splendid wisdom of its great unconscious knowing. The psyche brings forth the ego that perceives psychologically as the I perceives physically. Both the I and the ego are formations focused toward perception of exterior reality. Your experience in the world of physical matter flows outward from the center of your inner psyche. Then you perceive this experience. Exterior events, circumstances, and conditions are meant as a kind of living feedback. Altering the state of the psyche automatically alters the physical circumstances. There is no other valid way of changing physical events. It might help if you imagine an inner living dimension within yourself, in which you create, in miniature psychic form, all the exterior conditions that you know. Simply put, you do exactly this. Your thoughts, feelings, and mental pictures can be called incipient exterior events, for in one way or another, each of these is materialized into physical reality. You change even the most permanent seeming conditions of your life constantly through the varying attitudes you have toward them. There is nothing in your exterior experience that did not originate within you. Interactions with others do occur, of course, yet there are none that you do not accept or draw to you by your own thoughts, attitudes, or emotions. This applies to each area of life. In your terms, it applies both before life and after it. In the most miraculous fashion, you are given the gift of creating your experience. In this existence, you are learning to handle the inexhaustible energy that is available to you. The mass condition of the world and the situation of each individual in it is the materialization of man's progress as he forms his world. The joy of creativity flows through you as effortlessly as your breath. From it, the most minute areas of your outer experience spring. Your feelings have electromagnetic realities that rise outward, affecting the atmosphere itself. They group through attraction, building up areas of events and circumstances that finally coalesce, so to speak, either in matter as objects or as events in quote-unquote time. Some feelings and thoughts are translated into structures that you call objects. These exist, in your terms, in a medium you call space. Others are translated instead into psychological structures called events that seem to exist in a medium you call time. Space and time are both root assumptions, which simply means that man accepts both and assumes that his reality is rooted in a series of moments and a dimension of space. So your inner experience is translated in those terms. Even the duration of an event or object in space or time is determined by the intensity of the thoughts or emotions that gave it birth. Duration in space is not the same as duration in time, however, though it may seem that this is the case. I am speaking in your terms now. An event or object that exists briefly in space may have a much greater duration in time. It may have far greater importance and intensity, existing in your memory, for example, long after it has disappeared in space. Such an event or object does not merely exist symbolically within your mind or memory, but in your terms, its actual reality continues as a time event. Nor is its reality in space annihilated as long as it exists within your mind. Let us take a very simple example. A child has been told not to play with a doll. The order is disobeyed. The child, wittingly or unwittingly, breaks the doll, and it is finally thrown away. The doll exists in time quite vitally as long as the child or the adult-to-be remembers it. If the doll sat on a bureau, and this is all vividly recalled, then the space in which the doll sat still carries the impression of the doll, though other objects may be placed there. You react, therefore, not only to what is visible to your physical eyes in space, or to what is directly in front of you in time, but also to objects and events whose reality is still with you, though they may seem to have disappeared. Basically, you create your experience through your beliefs about yourself and the nature of reality. Another way to understand this is to realize that you create your experience through your expectations. Your feeling tones are your emotional attitudes toward yourself and life in general, and these generally govern the large areas of experience. They give the overall emotional coloration that characterizes what happens to you. You are what happens to you. Your emotional feelings are often transitory, but beneath there are certain qualities of feeling uniquely your own. They are like deep musical chords. While your day-to-day feelings may rise or fall, these characteristic feeling tones lie beneath. Sometimes they rise to the surface, but in great long rhythms. You cannot call these negative or positive. They are instead tones of your being. They represent the most inner portion of your experience. This does not mean that they are hidden from you or are meant to be. It simply means that they represent the core from which you form your experience. If you have become afraid of emotion or in the expression of feeling, or if you have been taught that the inner self is no more than a repository of uncivilized impulses, then you may have the habit of denying this deep rhythm. You may try to operate as if it did not exist, or even try to refute it, but it represents your deepest, most creative impulses. To fight against it is like trying to swim upstream against a strong current. These feeling tones, then, pervade your being. They are the form your spirit takes when combined with flesh. From them, from your core, your flesh arises. Everything that you experience has consciousness, and each consciousness is endowed with its own feeling tone. There is great cooperation involved in the formation of the earth as you think of it, and so the individual living structures of the planet rise up from the feeling tone within each atom and molecule. Your flesh springs about you in response to these inner chords of your being, and the trees, rocks, seas, and mountains spring up as the body of the earth from the deep inner chords within the atoms and molecules, which are also living. Because of the creative cooperation that exists, the miracle of physical materialization is performed so smoothly and automatically that consciously you are not aware of your part in it. The feeling tone then is the motion and fiber, the timber, the portion of your energy devoted to your physical experience. Now it flows into what you are as a physical being and materializes you in the world of seasons, space, flesh, and time. Its source, however, is quite independent of the world that you know. Once you learn to get the feeling of your own inner tone, then you are aware of its power, strength, and durability, and you can to some extent ride with it into deeper realities of experience. The incredible emotional richness and variety and splendor of physical experience is the material reflection of this inner feeling tone. It pervades the events in your life, the overall inner direction, the quality of perception. It fills up and illuminates the individual aspects of your life, and largely determines the pervasive subjective climate in which you dwell. It is the essence of yourself. Its sweeps are broad in range, however. It does not determine, for example, specific events. It paints the colors in the large quote-unquote landscape of your experience. It is the feeling of yourself, inexhaustible. In other terms, it represents the expression of yourself in pure energy, from which your individuality rises, the you of you, unmistakably given identity that is never duplicated. This energy comes from the core of being, from all that is, and represents the source of never-ending vitality. It is being, being in you. As such, all of your energy and power of being is focused and reflected through you in the direction of your three-dimensional existence. While your feeling tone is uniquely yours, still it is expressed in a certain fashion that is shared by all consciousnesses focused in physical reality. So in those terms, you spring from the earth as all the other creatures and natural living structures. You are, while physical, a portion of nature therefore, not apart from it. Trees and rocks possess their own consciousness, and also share a gestalt consciousness, even as the living portions of your body. The cells and organs have their own awarenesses, and a gestalt one. So the race of man also has individual consciousness and a gestalt or mass consciousness, of which you individually are hardly aware. The mass race consciousness in its terms possesses an identity. You are a portion of that identity while still being unique, individual, and independent. You are confined only to the extent that you have chosen physical reality, and so placed yourself within its context of experience. While physical, you follow physical laws or assumptions. These form the framework for corporeal expression. Within this framework, you have full freedom to create your experience, your personal life in all of its aspects, the living picture of the world. Your personal life, and to some extent your individual living experience, help create the world as it is known in your time. In this book, we will be speaking about your own subjective world and your part in the creation of events, both private and shared. It is important, before we continue, that you realize that consciousness is within all physical phenomena, however. It is vital that you realize your position within nature. Nature is created from within. The personal life that you know rises up from within you, yet is given. Since you are a part of being, then in a certain fashion you give yourself the life that is being lived through you. You make your own reality. There is no other rule. Knowing this is the secret of creativity. I have spoken of quote-unquote you, yet this must not be confused with the you that you often think you are, the ego alone, for the ego is only a portion of you. It is that expert part of your personality that deals directly with the contents of your conscious mind, and is concerned most directly with the material portions of your experience. The ego is a very specialized portion of your greater identity. It is a portion of you that arises to deal directly with the life that the larger you is living. The ego can feel cut off, lonely, and frightened, however, if the conscious mind lets the ego run away with it. The ego and the conscious mind are not the same thing. The ego is composed of various portions of the personality. It is a combination of characteristics, ever-changing, that act in a unitary fashion. the portion of the personality that deals most directly with the world. The conscious mind is an excellent perceiving attribute, a function that belongs to inner awareness, but in this case is turned outward toward the world of events. Through the conscious mind, the soul looks outward. Left alone, it perceives clearly. In certain terms, the ego is the eye through which the conscious mind perceives, or the focus through which it views physical reality. But the conscious mind automatically changes its focus throughout life. The ego, while appearing the same to itself, ever changes. It is only when the conscious mind becomes rigid in its direction, or allows the ego to take on some of its own functions, that difficulties arise. Then, the ego allows the conscious mind to work in certain directions and blocks its awareness in others. And so it is from your larger identity that you form the reality that you know. It is up to you to do this with joy and vigor, clearing your conscious mind so that the deeper knowledge of your greater identity can form joyous expressions in the world of flesh. Chapter 2: Reality and Personal Beliefs. You form the fabric of your experience through your own beliefs and expectations. These personal ideas about yourself and the nature of reality will affect your thoughts and emotions. You take your beliefs about reality as truth and often do not question them. They seem self-explanatory. They appear in your mind as statements of fact, far too obvious for examination. Therefore, they are accepted without question too often. They are not recognized as beliefs about reality, but are instead considered characteristics of reality itself. Frequently, such ideas appear indisputable, so a part of you that it does not occur to you to speculate about their validity. They become invisible assumptions, but they nevertheless color and form your personal experience. Some people, for example, do not question their religious beliefs but accept them as fact. Others find it comparatively easy to recognize such inner assumptions when they appear in a religious context, but are quite blind to them in other areas. It is far simpler to recognize your own beliefs in regard to religion, politics, or similar subjects than it is to pinpoint your deepest beliefs about yourself and who and what you are, particularly in relationship with your own life. Many individuals are completely blind to their own beliefs about themselves and the nature of reality. Your own conscious thoughts will give you excellent clues. Often, you will find yourself refusing to accept certain thoughts that come to your mind because they conflict with other usually accepted ideas. Your conscious mind is always trying to give you a clear picture, but you often allow preconceived ideas to block out this intelligence. It has been fashionable to blame the subconscious for personality problems and difficulties, the idea being that early events, charged and mysterious, are lodged there. In this country, several generations grew up believing that the subconscious portions of the personality were unreliable, filled with negative energy, and contained only locked up unpleasant episodes best forgotten. They grew up believing that the conscious mind was relatively powerless, that adult experience was set in the days of infancy. These concepts themselves set up artificial divisions. People learned that they should not be aware of quote-unquote subconscious material. The doors to the inner self were to be shut tight. Only lengthy psychoanalysis could or should open them. The normal individual felt that he had best leave such areas alone, so in cutting off these portions of the self, barriers were also set up against the joy of the inner spontaneous self. People felt divorced from the core of their own reality. The concept of original sin was a very poor, limited, and distorted one, but at least along with it went rather simple procedures. Through baptism you might be saved, or through certain words or sacraments or rituals redemption could be found. The idea of the tainted subconscious, however, left man no such relatively easy way out. The few rituals possible required years of analysis, which only the very wealthy were privileged to experience. About the same time that the idea of the savory subconscious arose so strongly, the idea of the soul went out the window. Billions of people therefore believed in a reality in which they were deprived of the idea of a soul and burdened by the concept of a very unreliable, if not definitely evil, subconscious. They saw themselves as vulnerable, solitary points of egos, riding perilously and unprotected upon the tumultuous waves of involuntary processes. At about the same time, many intelligent persons were realizing that organized religions' idea of God and of heaven and hell were distorted, unjust, and smacked of children's fairy tales. For these individuals, there was no place to look for help. Under the circumstances, to look within would have seemed foolhardy, for they had been taught that this within contained the source of their problems to begin with. Those who could not afford therapy tried the harder to inhibit any messages from the inner self, for fear they would be swallowed by the savage infantile emotions. Now, first of all, there are no limitations or divisions to the self, though for purposes of discussion, a word like ego may be used here because you understand what you think it means. You can indeed depend upon seemingly unconscious portions of yourself. As you will see later, you can become more and more consciously aware